Hello, and welcome to In the Roud. Greetings and salutations, dear listeners. This is In the Roud, a folk song podcast, and I am your host, Matt Quinn. Join me as we travel through the world of traditional folk song, one song per episode in the order they appear in the Roud Index. Each episode will feature two guests, one providing an historical look at the song, while the other will be a singer from the folk music scene to talk about their own version of the song. And here we are, back with Season 6. How lovely it is to be back, I think. I hope you've all had a nice break over the winter and Christmas period. Mine was fraught with illness and car trouble and all other sorts of things, but it also included a nice short tour of New Zealand with my band Culverake. So, nice things as well as some very irritating things. I'm just about recovered from the jet lag of all that though, so I'm now ready to spend the next 10 weeks looking at the next 10 songs in the Roud Index. The songs we're going to cover this season are Roud 51, today The Unquiet Grave, Roud 52, Little Musgrave and Lady Barnard, Roud 53, Child Morris, Roud 54, Barbara Allen, Roud 55, Lord Abor and Mary Flynn, Roud 56, Young Johnstone, Roud 57, False Foodridge, Roud 58, Gelon Graham, Roud 59, Fair Mary of Wallington, and Roud 60, The Brisk Young Sailor. What a fun-filled 2.5 months we have in store for you. This podcast is proud to be partly sponsored by the Traditional Song Forum. Meeting regularly, both in person and online, the TSF provides a place for a variety of topics related to folk song, song collectors, singers, and many other aspects of folk song research to be presented and discussed. It's free to join, and most meetings are free to attend. So discover more about the TSF at www.tradsong.org. That's www.tradsong.org. But let's get going. This week's song is Roud 51, which is Child Ballad number 78, The Unquiet Grave. Later on, we'll hear from our singer guest, Nick Dow, but for now, let's have a look at the song's history with returning historical contributor Brian Peters. Well, hello and welcome back to In the Roud, Brian Peters. Hello.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Brian. How are you doing?
Oh, I don't want to go on about it. I've not been very well. I've had a cold and a cough, but I'm definitely on the mend today. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to get through this with you.
Good to hear it. Yes, I've been under the weather most of the week. We're recording this on the 6th of February, and I was in New Zealand for 2 weeks at the end of January, doing some gigs with Culverake, and I got back 8 days ago, and I still am in the throes of hideous jet lag. I just can't seem to sleep very well or at all, and it is wearing me down mentally and physically. But you know,
it's horrible flight, that one. He's back from New Zealand or Australia.
Yeah, it was 11 and a half. Oh yeah, so I'm going to this bit. 11 and a half hours from Auckland to Shanghai, and then there was 4 hours in Shanghai airport in Shanghai, and then there was 11 and a half hours from Shanghai to Gatwick. And then I slept for 16 hours, and then I didn't sleep for 2 nights. And so it goes on. So, but life moves on, and so up looms season 6 of In the Roud.
Hurrah!
Hurrah indeed. Roud's 51 to 60, and here we are today, Roud 51, The Unquiet Grave.
Indeed we are.
Start us off, as always, give us what's the song about and what is the plot of the song.
Okay, so well, first of all, it's round 51, also child 78. We decided, you and I, before the program started, that we were going to call it the Unquiet Grave, although it's often known as Cold Blows the Wind. I've got a copy of a broadside in front of me with that title, but Unquiet Grave is child's title, and that's fine for us.
Is there an elongated broadside title? Is this one of? Does it have like an extended, the Cold Blows the Wind, in which the young man goes to one of those lengthy titles that lasts as long as the song?
No, those tend to be on the older broadsides, the sort of 17th century ones, those ones with these ridiculously long titles, and quite often two ridiculously long titles tagged onto each other. Now, this is the one I'm looking at is a 19th century broadside where they were using basically smaller pieces of paper, and they didn't have room for all that stuff.
Oh, I
It had
see.
gone
Fair
out of
enough.
fashion by then.
Lovely, nice.
Okay, so this is what the scholars call a revenant ballad. Basically, with revenant, obviously that means somebody's coming back, and in the revenant ballads, people are coming back from the dead. So the usual list of this kind of ballad includes The Cruel Mother, The Wife of Usher's Well, Proud Lady Margaret, Sweet William's Ghost, and this one.
Well, Sweet William's Ghost is, I mean, it was last year, but the if you listen to this, you can go back one episode and listen to, because the previous episode, which was the end of the last season, was on Sweet William's Ghost. So these two are together in Roud anyway.
They're together in Child too.
Oh, they well, there we go. So yeah, Sweet William's Ghost and then Unquiet Grave.
And they are consecutive, I'm sure, because Child recognised there was some common ground between them. Apart from the fact of the Revenant, there is also some text that's in common, which we will get to.
Ah,
So, okay, the basic plot is a young woman or a young man, it can be either, is sitting mourning on or near the grave of their dead lover, and they're obviously distraught, so they hang around weeping and wailing for a year and a day, at which point the lover's ghost arises from the grave. It's not entirely clear whether it's in sort of a physical manifestation or there's just this voice that emanates from the grave saying, "Just shut up, will you? I can't get to sleep." But what happens anyway is that the ghost complains that they're unable to rest because of all this sobbing and groaning that's going on up top. So the mourning lover, the mortal lover, at this point says, well, could we perhaps just have one kiss for old time's sake? But the ghost refuses on the ground. Well, I guess the ghost must have come out of the ground as a manifestation if the other lover is expecting a kiss. The ghost refuses on the grounds that a kiss from a corpse is generally fatal. I read that somewhere. And then they have a bit more chit-chat. They share a reminiscence of walking in a garden when they were both alive and were young lovers. And then you get this memento mori reflection that all the flowers in that garden have withered and died, as indeed must we mortals. So scholars tend to interpret the ballad as a cautionary tale, warning of the psychological damage that can be caused by morbid mourning for too long. So it's got a moral there, a fairly obvious moral, but I think that's something that bereaved people have to come to terms with. I guess after a while, however painful, you have to stop and move on. So that's the basic story. There's some really interesting additional elements in some of the versions, quite a lot of the versions actually, but I always like when I do the what's the story bit just to give the basics of the story that are common to pretty much every version. So that's the plot.
sure, yeah, and yeah, we'll come to variations and things later on. Was this a particularly popular and widespread song, or are we talking relatively sort of not obscurity, but not widely shared around?
Well, it's I would say it's kind of a mid-range one. It's I think in Bronson there are 43 versions, and
Yep.
that compares with both Young Hunting and George Collins also have 43 versions. That's obviously a lot more than some of the more obscure rare ballads where there's only one version in Bronson or even nothing with a tune at all. But compared with, say, Little Musgrave or Lord Lovell are in the 70s, and then the really popular ones like Lord Thomas and Fair Ellender 147, Barbara Allen 198. So yeah, it's a kind of mid-range, maybe Championship or League One for football fans out there. It's in that kind of range.
Yeah, because I noticed the Roud Index gives, obviously, give or take all the duplicates, 266 entries across the Folksong Index and the Broadside Index combined. So that's, yeah, not inconsiderable, but it's definitely not up there with Musgrave or Barbara Allen, both of which are in the first half of this season of the podcast. So we'll be talking about them next week and 2 weeks later.
Yeah, you've got some biggies in this round, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But yeah, it's interesting that I noticed, as you did, 43 entries in Bronson, 43 melodies, but then only 4 versions in the child ballads. And that's quite a considerable sort of, not dichotomy, it's a considerable difference. One might expect, if there was not many versions in child, there might not be many. It might not be popular, and therefore Bronson couldn't find much. But Bronson seems to have been far more sort of successful than Child was in this case.
Well, there's a good reason for that, which is that this ballad, I mean, we need to talk about the age of it and the distribution of it, but
Yeah.
basically this ballad is very much located in England. And of course, Child had relatively few English sources. So if you look at his entry for Child 78, none of the usual suspects, the Walter Scotts, the William Motherwells, the Burns, the Hurd, Kinloch, none of them at all are in there, because it was very rare in Scotland. So I've always complained about the Scottish ballad bias of the Child ballads, but this is a great example of what happens with an English ballad.
Of course, because when we do get a mention of Buchan, of course, the 4th version in Child.
Yes, he's the only one of the usual suspects that's there, is Peter Buchan.
But then, as I noted before we started, the version A in Child communicated to the Folklore Record 1 by Miss Charlotte Latham as written down from the lips of a girl in Sussex. And that's all the information we get.
That was the good thing about people like Cecil Sharp. They actually did take down people's names and the date and the place, whereas, you can look at some of those American collections, for instance, Brown collection from the Appalachians, and it will just say, from Mountain Whites, which is about as vague as you can get.
Yeah. And then I know we'll do this later probably, but version B in Child is from the 1877 Ipswich Journal. So definitely England. And then version C, but then version B, the Ipswich Journal, from memory after more than 70 years. So, how accurate is that? And then version C, from a yeoman in Suffolk who got it from his nurse. So, there's, 3 England ones and 1 Scotland, but we'll come to that later. It's just, yes, interesting that in this case, there's 3 England ones and only 1 Scot, so that the balance is the opposite way round there from what it usually is. And then, Bronson found, loads. And so that's
But again, Bronsons aren't nearly all from England. We will talk about the ones from North America as well. Cecil Sharp found loads. He said it was one of the songs that was particularly popular in Somerset.
Right. And I was just about to say, because you mentioned North America, I was going to ask, did this spread internationally, or was this, it's mostly England. I've actually noticed on the Roud Index, if you want to filter by country, 185 entries are linked to England, and then 16 USA, 10 in Canada, 5 Scotland, 3 Ireland. So it is obviously predominantly England, but the next most found is America. So it did travel, but not massively, possibly.
No, that's absolutely right. Again, you have to bear in mind the age of the ballad. This is, I think, Steve Roud in the New Penguin Book of English Folk Songs has a write-up on it, and he managed to find a broadside in the Madden collection, which is this huge collection of broadsides in Cambridge, that he thought was round about 1800. There's no imprint on it, so that it's impossible to date it accurately. But I think just from the appearance of it and the way it's set out, Steve thinks that that is about 1800. But of course, that isn't nearly as old as many of these other ballads that we've been talking about from Child that go back to these great big wordy 17th century broadsides. So I would say that the reason we don't have many hits in the USA for this is that it's not old enough to have been taken over by the Appalachian migration. The people that ended up in Appalachia,
Right.
and they left England, Scotland, Northern Ireland during the 18th century, and this ballad was not around then. So if you look at the American ones, I did look at the American ones actually, and it's an interesting little exercise in how the Roud index, if you just look at it in the most bald figures, it rather overcounts. So you've got 17 hits for the USA, but 4 of those are from Gene Ritchie.
I was literally about to say 4 of them are Gene Ritchie.
Yeah. So I reckon that there are 5 independent versions of the Unquiet Grave have been collected in the USA out of those 17 hits. And of those, only the Ritchie family is from the Appalachian region. All the others are from the Northeast. I tell a lie. There's one from Virginia as well. But there's one from Vermont, one from New Jersey, and there's the North Carolina one. So very rare in the USA. The Canadian ones are all from Newfoundland. And again, if you look at the settlement of Newfoundland, there was the original settlement there was English in I think the 17th century, but then a lot more English people came over, particularly from the southwest of England in the 1800s. There's also quite a large Irish settlement in Newfoundland, but I am guessing that it was those 19th century English settlers that took the ballad to Newfoundland.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can just look at the Roud index in basic figures terms, but then you have to peer through the reeds to, as it were, to to whittle it down a bit to what you actually get. And I know we'll come to that later, but yeah, there's 5 entries in Scotland, 2 of which are Stanley Robertson, and we'll come to that later. But it's, that's young Kenneth. We'll come to that later on. But yeah, so it did spread a bit over the Atlantic, but not to any great extent, as far as the Roud index can tell us.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that figures. I think the Roud index is telling truth there.
Yeah.
So there was another. I'm looking at my notes that I just wanted to say a little bit more about the age of it, because that's something we usually talk about fairly early on.
I was about to ask. Yeah, how far back can we trace this?
Well, okay, it's a ballad that, although it's supernatural, and people tend to think, oh, it must be really old, lost in the mists of time, and so on. It's not really that old. We have this copy from around about 1800 that Steve Roud has dated to that kind of period. There was what may be a red herring, which is in Bronson's write-up in the traditional tunes of the Child ballads. He talks about this 15th century carol, which begins, "There blows a cold wind today, today. The wind blows cold today." And that kind of recalls the opening of the Unquiet Grave, which very commonly starts, "Cold blows the wind over my true love." Having said that, the rest of this carol has nothing in common with the ballad of the Unquiet Grave at all. So, as I say, it might be a bit of a red herring. So I think much more reliably it's beginning of the 19th century. That's as old as it is. And as I was saying before, that accounts for the lack of spread into the Appalachian Mountains.
Sure, it does sound a bit like almost like a sort of stock wintry phrase in a way that could be used for a multitude of things. It's the winter version of Once Upon a Time, or As I Went Out Walking in May, or something.
Yeah. But the thing, as usual, as you probably know from previous episodes, I'm always very interested in Child's head notes. And he says a few things about this ballad. He has the idea that it's made up of odd fragments of something much bigger, although I don't particularly believe that. I think it actually tells a quite coherent tale in its own right. But he does find some commonality. with the Ballad of Sweet William's Ghost, which, as we were saying, is the one immediately before the Unquiet Grave,
That's
both
right.
in the Child Ballads and in the Roud Index. So there's a verse in Sweet William's Ghost where Lady Margaret asks for a kiss from Sweet William. She says, "One kiss from your ruby lips, that's all I want of thee." And then he replies, "My lips are so bitter," he says, "my breath is so strong. If you get one kiss of my ruby lips, your days will not be long." That is from Sweet William's Ghost, but those two verses are very, very common in just about every version of the Unquiet Grave. So that's one of the interesting things Child says. But then he also relates it to a lot of folk tales, which, as you know, Child loved to do that kind of thing. And he finds all these old beliefs about excessive mourning for the dead. There are folk tales, I think, from Ireland, that if you cry over the grave, the shroud will become soaked. And I think there's an Irish belief that the tears can actually pierce a hole in the body of the dead person. There was a tale from Scotland in which a ghost complains that the tears of their lover are scalding their skin. And there are various other tales from Europe as well. From Germany, there are a whole number of folk tales about this business of the tears of the person that's mourning is soaking the shroud. Even as far away as India and Persia, there are legends that excessive grieving prevents the dead from resting. So there's plenty of examples from folktale and legend of this type of tale, but of course that does not mean that the Unquiet Grave goes back as far as the folktales. It could just mean that whoever composed the Unquiet Grave was aware of those sort of beliefs and incorporated them into what was basically a new ballad.
Right. Yeah. So it's not. So apart from that carol with a tangential sort of first line, this is not, as far as we can tell, not a particularly old song. Maybe.
No, no. I mean, I think a lot of these supernatural ballads have got a lot to do with the Romantic era anyway. I think some of Child's the people he collated his ballads from, the people like Sir Walter Scott and so on, used to big up the supernatural. I think they tweaked some of their ballads to bring more of that in because that was the fashion of their time.
Right.
Talking of dodgy Scottish collectors, you mentioned that there was just the one Scots version in Child from Peter Buchan, who
Oh
from
yes.
previous episodes listeners may recall that Child was a bit suspicious of Peter Buchan's work. He reckoned that he messed about with them and added bits, and his
Well,
versions were always
yes.
much.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glancing through the text for the Buchan version in Child, and it is not. It is, or it does. It is the outlier in terms of the text. It's very unlike the other three. You know.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, but Buchan gave it the title "The Ghost and the Sailor" for a start, which is a bit odd.
Yeah.
Um, if you look at it carefully, you'll find that most of it is actually quite similar to the broadside versions of the Unquiet Grave. A 12-month under the day being past, the ghost began to speak. Why sit ye here upon my grave and will not let me sleep? I've seen that in many of the English versions, but then Buchan, I'm sure you've been having a little laugh about this as well. Um, it begins, "Proud Boreas makes a hideous noise." Boreas was apparently the Greek god of the north wind. "Loud roars the fatal fleed," which is a flood. "I never loved a love but one. In churchyard she lies dead." So yeah,
Yes.
it's a bit of a bizarre opening. You've got to think if Buchan didn't put it in that line about Proud Boreas, some other poet has, because it just doesn't ring true at all.
Indeed, and then other versions always have. They usually have that verse you mentioned. The things about, like in version A, for example, in Child, "You crave one kiss of my clay cold lips, but my breath smells earthy strong," and all that sort of thing. My breath is earthy and strong in version 3, but in this Buchan one, "Your breath is as the rose is sweet, mine as the sulphur strong."
Yes,
Sulphur
that's a
is
good.
sulphur is alarmingly specific compared to what you get in all the rest of the versions of this song, as far as I could
Yeah,
tell.
very true.
And when you get specifics in terms of like things like sulfur, that alarm bells spring up, don't they?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, that's all sort of trying to bring in, the devil and hell and so on, the sulphurous fumes. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a bit dodgy. Then he has this, Buchan's version has this last verse. Lament ne more for me, my love, the powers we must obey, but hoist up one sail to the wind, your ship must sail away. So this is where the ghost and the sailor comes in. But again, I've never seen that verse anywhere else. So I think we might be a little bit suspicious of Buchan's version.
Indeed. But yeah, and nevertheless, yeah, the other three, or the English ones, are very similar.
Yeah.
And so that's when you look at the outlier of Buchan. But
The three versions, English versions in Child, are very similar to one another and also very similar to these broadsides, which interestingly, many of them seem to have been printed in Birmingham. Obviously London was the centre of broadside printing, and you've got all these printers like Pitts and Catnach and Such and so on, but none of them, as far as we know, seem to have printed it. So the one I've got in front of me is printed by Jackson in Birmingham, and there were other Birmingham ones as well. So whether that accounts for the popularity in the kind of more westerly areas of England, I really don't know.
that's right. Of the 14 entries in the broadside index on the Roud Index, I think 10 of them mention Birmingham. you know,
Yeah,
it's most of them. Jackson, W. Pratt, where's the other one? Oh, W. Pratt again. It's either W. Pratt or Jackson, or W. Wright as well,
yeah.
or R. Heppel. All these different broadside printers. So, and of course the Frank Kitson broadside collection, but he was just collecting from wherever, so that doesn't really matter. So because this one comes after numerically in the Roud Index and Child, and consequently this podcast. Does the ghost have a name in this, like Sweet William's ghost, or is this just an unnamed, as far as the song goes?
I've never seen them named as far as I know,
No.
except the Stanley Robertson one. When we get to that, there is a name in that, but that's such an outlier of a version anyway
Yeah.
that I think
And
that
so,
needs to be considered separately.
there we go. This is Buchan again. Buchan mentions Willie in verse 6 in Child. Mind not ye the day, Willie, since you and I did walk.
Oh, okay.
But that's Buchan, so,
That's fine, yeah. And again, of course, Willie is an absolute standard issue Scots ballad character.
Yes, exactly. But so yes, but no one is named in what we consider to be the actual versions of this.
No.
Well, there we go. Isn't that interesting? This
So
this one is a more nondescript version of Sweet William's Ghost in a way.
yeah, in a way, and probably not as old as Sweet William's Ghost. I think that goes back further.
Yeah,
But there are some interesting things. As I say, a lot of these texts are very standard. There are one or two peculiarities. There was something I picked up on from the versions in Bronson. Basically, the revenant, the ghost, is generally a benign figure. They just say, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, but you better not kiss my lips, otherwise you're going to die." But then there are one or two versions where there's a sort of hint of something a bit more threatening. So there's a version from Baron Gould, which has the couplet, "Now if you were not true in word, as now I know you to be, I'd tear you as the withered leaves are torn from off the tree." Now, there are some suspicions about that text as well, the Baron Gould one, but there is some corroboration of that because there's the version from Dorset from a woman called Jane Han, and she has, "If you wasn't my own sweetheart, as I know you well to be, I'd rend you up in pieces small as the leaves upon the tree." This is almost like some of the versions of, oh God, what's the ballad called where he threatens to tear her to pieces at the end? The one about the magic and the magic spells and so
the
on.
Broomfield Hill has that
Yeah, the
occasionally.
Broomfield Hill.
That's the one.
It's slightly reminiscent of those kind of ideas.
Oh, there we go. The Jane Ham. I've just found it. It's in the book Marrowbones. Anyone's
Yeah.
got that? And I just noticed, other bits in that. It's got a verse about Cupid's garden in it where they did walk and other things. "Oh, don't you see the fire, sweetheart, the fire that burns so blue?" That's nice. where my poor soul tormented is while I stay here with you.
Well, that's very much an outlier verse as well, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I've got a copy of. I just noticed something else. No, I didn't. It's something else entirely. I'll forget that. Don't know what that was. Um, yeah, Jane Ham. That was collected by Hammond. Was that right?
Yeah,
Dorset, June 1906 in Stoke
that's right.
Abbot. Talking about names and things. There's no names. Is it always, if at all, is it always Greenwood where he was slain, or are there other places?
No, there are. That's a good question, and I don't have the information right in front of me now. But there are one or two where a place is named, although it's not necessarily a recognisable, town name or anything. But yes, I think very rarely there is a specific name.
Oh, I've just found one. Yeah, just because I'm very quickly scanning through all the copies, all the versions I have. I've got a pile of books here, and I'm quickly scanning through each one to see what the names are. I've got a copy of English County Songs here, words and music, collected and edited by Lucy Broadwood and J.A. Fuller Maitland. And there's a Shropshire version in here where it says, "Cold blows the wind o'er my true love, cold blow the drops of rain. I never had but one true love, and in Camvile,
Um,
Camvile,
yeah, never heard of it,
he
but
was slain." And yeah, Camville, he was slain. I'll do as much for my true love. And that ends up with, yeah, go fetch me a nut from a dungeon keep and water from a stone and white milk from a maiden's breast that babe bare never none. We're getting back into impossible riddles territory,
well,
aren't
of
we?
course we are. Yeah, I mean, there's a very interesting essay by David Atkinson in the book The English Traditional Ballad, which, as we were talking about before, is quite hard to get, but it's a
Yeah.
really interesting book. And he has a whole chapter called "The Lover's Tasks in the Unquiet Grave."
Ah,
So, as you say, these are very much reminiscent of the kind of tasks you find in the cambric shirt, Scarborough Fair, whatever you like to call it.
that's
They're,
right.
I should also mention, by the by, that Tasks is coincidentally the name of my most recent album. But let's move quickly on from that because self promotion is not
What?
the name of the game here.
What a plug! That was fantastic. It's almost as if we do this for a living, Brian. That was,
Yes.
but this self-promotion that was masterfully handled.
Yeah, well, or shameless,
Or
depending on which way you look at it. So,
yeah.
moving rapidly on, so you have the tasks in this. There's the note from the dungeon deep, which is sometimes rendered as a nut from a dungeon deep. And I should say that although this stanza is not in all of the collected versions, it is in the broadside. So the first task is a note or a nut for a dungeon deep, although again in oral versions that can vary a bit. There's a very exotic line from one of the American versions which says, "Go fetch me an egg from the billows so deep." And
Ooh.
all of these are pretty hard to do. And there's also fetch light from a dungeon. So that's task one. Task two is fetch water from a stone. Task three is milk from a maiden's breast, and of course, a virgin, has never had a child, so they would not be able to produce milk. So those are the three tasks. And some versions, including at least one of the broadsides, has an answering verse, which doesn't really advance the narrative at all. But basically, they respond, "How can I fetch a note from a dungeon deep, or water from a stone? How can I get milk from a maiden's breast?" And there is one version in which there is actually a resolution to the tasks, and this is from Baron Gould. What does she do? In Baron Gould's, it's fetch me a light from a dungeon deep, so she strikes a light from a flint, wring water from a stone, she presses an ice bell, which is basically an icicle, so she rubs the icicle and warms it up and water drips away from it. And then for the milk from the maiden's breast, she pressed the milk from a Johnny's wort. That's some kind of
Oh,
herb, I'm not sure exactly what. And so she completes the task. However, in David Atkinson's essay, he reckons that Baron Gould just made that up, which is a bit disappointing.
indeed. My favorite sort of task like that is is in we covered it in the Captain Wedderburn's courtship episode. You get one about bring me a priest unborn, and in some versions, most versions, it's there is no such thing as a priest unborn or something. But then in the Irish ones, they actually do mention the what's his name? I'll look it up. Melchizedek, which is the king of Salem in the Hebrew Bible in Genesis, and that sort of turns up in like a version sung by Willie Clancy and Jimmy Crowley and a few people. I think that's a fantastically odd thing to turn up in a folk song.
That is amazing. Yeah.
But nothing quite so mad in this one though.
No, but anyway, we have to be highly dubious about Baron Gould's resolutions to all this. Baron Gould laid a lot of stress on the idea of plighting the troth, and I think this bit is true, or certainly according to David Atkinson, this is to do with that. The whole business of the Unquiet Grave is based on the fact that in the old days, when two lovers plighted their troth, as the phrase went, they were bound to each other even after death. In other words, the part of the point of the Unquiet Grave is to release that troth that's been plighted, and then the living person can then get on with their lives and find a new partner if they feel that that's appropriate. And the interpretation of these tasks, the apparently impossible tasks, is that they are set in order to allow that troth to be broken. And again, Baron Gould has a different version. It's the one he printed in Songs of the West, and that had the lines, "Oh, will I now redeem the pledge that I once gave?" In other words, the making explicit this idea of the old vows being rescinded. But unfortunately, Baron Gould made that up as well in a different version. And he took that from an old West Country folk tale, and as he expressed it himself, in order to complete the ballad. In other words, complete as in making the ballad conform to what I think it means.
Right, sure. I was just looking.
We're all at it,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there is no rule that says you mustn't, but at the same time, sometimes it's quite irritating when we find they did. I was just checking something, going back to Greenwood briefly, because I was just scanning through some versions in Bronson, looking just if there were other names, Greenwood, etc. But one of the versions actually says, I never know how, but one true love, in the green woods he was slain. And to me, that sounds more, not original or authentic, but sounds more like it might be, not accurate, I can't think of the word, but it sounds like in Greenwood, one word, sounds like something that's evolved from in the green woods.
Possibly, yeah.
Rather than a place called Greenwood, I think in the green woods sounds more like, to my ears, sounds like that might be an older version. I mean, that was that's a Sharp manuscript collected in 1908. So there obviously are earlier versions, but that's in my mind sounds like it might be an earlier thing,
Well, it could be. I was going to say, talking of Sharp, I was going to say a little bit about the tunes, and I think I was going to ask you to offer one or two of them as well. But before
Sure.
I ask you, there is a pretty generic tune to this ballad, and when we hear the version from George Dunn, you'll hear a recording of that. But I would say this is the number 8 in Bronson, and this Cecil Sharp collected this from a fellow called John Barnett in Bridgewater, and I'm kind of busking it slightly here, but the tune for that one, and I'm sure this will be very recognisable to a lot of people. Cold blows the winter, my true love, and sprinkling falls the rain. I never had but one true love, and in Greenwood he was slain. That is very much the generic version of the tune, and that's quite representative of it. But if I sing you one that this is the one that Baron Gould collected and doctored the text, but there's no reason to think the tune isn't authentic. Cold blows the wind tonight, sweetheart. Cold are the drops of rain. The very first love that I ever had. In Greenwood he was slain. So it's
Ooh,
almost identical tune, but it finishes unresolved on the sixth. And if you were accompanying that, you might decide to put in a minor
yeah.
chord or a four chord or something. I apologise for my croaky voice today, by the way, but I do have the mitigating
That's
circumstances
all
of the
right.
cold.
I might not.
Why don't you sing? Why don't you sing the one from the Dorset one from Jane Han, which is an interesting one?
Oh yes, yeah. By coincidence, I still have it open in front of me.
Good.
That's right. It's in the Marrowbones book, and yes, many listeners will recognise this melody immediately. How pleasant is the wind tonight. I feel some drops of rain. I never had but one true love, and in Greenwood he was slain. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn all on his grave for a 12-month and a day. There you go.
Yeah, well, we know that one, don't we?
Indeed, we do. Dives and Lazarus, but also um, uh, John Tams used it. It's the part of the melody of Only Remembered in Warhorse, I think. It's become
Yeah,
quite a
I always
well-known,
think of
a
them.
well-used melody.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's loads of songs that were collected with that tune. The one I always think of is The Murder of Mariah Martin because of the Shirley Collins recording of it from all those years ago.
Oh, that's on. Is that the one on No Roses?
Yes.
Shirley Collins, the Albion Band. That's right. So that jumped out at me straight away. And this is weird because I've recorded it already. I've next week we've got David Atkinson on, your friend of mine, for the history of Little Musgrave, and I've already recorded that. I did that a month ago, before I went to New Zealand, and there's a melody in there, which in Bronson in there, which is completely unexpected. That's in Bronson that I thought was really funny. So listeners will find out next week. But yes, so there's that one, the one that's Dives and Lazarus.
Yeah, I've got a couple more actually. There's
Yep.
one that I don't always follow Bronson's grouping of some of these tunes. So there's one that there are two that are definitely Davies and Lazarus. There's also one from Shropshire as well as that Dorset one. But then he has one from Baring Gould, a different one from Baring Gould, and I'm just going to approximate to this. Bamba. Cold blows the wind, my true love, and sprinkling falls the rain. I never had but one true love, and in Greenwood he was slain. Which is quite a nice Aeolian minor tune. Again, apologies for my croaky performance of it. But that doesn't sound to me an awful lot like Dives and Lazarus. Obviously, it's in a sort of minor tonality, but I
Yeah,
sometimes wonder how Bronson went about this.
indeed. There's the May Bradley one from Shropshire in the Fred Hamer book, Gardeners, in the Fred book, Garner's Gay. I'll probably play a clip of May Bradley later on.
Oh, you need to play the clip of May Bradley. I think we'll save that one up for the listeners. But
Yeah,
they're in a
there.
minority, but there are some quite nice modal ones. And there's one more. This is one that I learned myself at one time. This is from Lucy White, one of the half sisters, Lucy White and Louis Hooper, that Cecil Sharp got so many songs from in the 1900s. She sang, and it was only one verse that she knew. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn all on her grave for a 12-month and a day. So if you're looking for a nice modal one to learn, that's another interesting tune.
And I spotted that first line is also the first line of Lovely Joan. A
Oh, yes.
fine young man it was indeed. You know, So
Yeah, of course it is.
there's that as
Well
well.
spotted.
And a couple more from me. Going back to the one that's in Lucy Broadwood's English County Songs, the one that's sort of Shropshire-ish, that had the thing about the nut from the Dungeon Keep. This is a minor or modalish thing. I'll try and sing this. Cold blows the wind, oh my true love. Cold blows the drops of rain. I never, never had but one true love, and in Camville he was slain. I'll do as much for my true love as any young girl may. I'll sit and weep down by his grave for 12 months and a day. So that's, yeah, mostly that similar sort of thing.
Well done, Matt. Very brave choice of key there, but yes, it's definitely,
Yeah.
very definitely a relation of the Lazarus tune.
Yeah, and there's a couple of Newfoundland ones before I do what I was going to do as my final one. This is in a 1942 Journal of the English Folk Dance and Song Society. There's an article on the Unquiet Grave by Ruth Harvey, and there's a couple of Newfoundland melodies written out at the beginning. La da 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 da, ya da ya da da da. How could these winds? Sorry, these are not the first verses. These are other verses. How could these winds do blow, dear lad? What heavy drops of rain! I never had but one true love, and she from me was slain. Sung by the Reverend Gibbs Bull from Exploits, Newfoundland, 1929.
Yeah, very melodic, but not that similar to the generic one.
No, and the other Newfoundland one in the same book, sung by Mrs. Rosie White of Sandy Cove, Newfoundland, 1929. There's been falling drops of dew, sweetheart, and heavy falls of rain. I've only had what one sweetheart. In the green fields he was slain.
Yeah, that's it.
There we go. Quite nice. And then I just want to. I always love hearing Jeff Wesley singing, and I've got a clip of Jeff Wesley later on. But Jeff had going back to the what you described as the very generic mainstream, as it were, melody. Jeff had a nice variation on that. The wind does blow today, my love, a few small spots of rain. I only ever had but one true love. In cold ground she is laid. I rather like that.
Yeah, again, yeah, quite similar to George Dunn, who we'll be hearing. I just think our listeners need to appreciate how difficult it is what you're doing here, on what I did as well a minute ago. You know, singing the same song to three or four different tunes, all of which is sight reading, it takes a bit of doing. So I don't think that needs to be taken for granted.
No, but listeners will probably realise I've edited out all of the fumblings and all of the miss. I'm not letting everyone hear how many times I had to sing that one of those ones just now. But yes, so it's there's some of them are quite, but I do quite like that Jeff Wesley one. There's some nice subtle variants there. I'm rather fond of. But then I'm a huge Jeff Wesley fan, and that very much suits his style of voice, that melody.
Yeah, it's lovely, man. Lovely singer, lovely fella.
Indeed.
Right, I've got, before we get on to the traditional recordings, there was just one little rabbit hole I wanted to take this conversation down, and that's about backstory. And I think you've discussed this in at least one of the previous episodes. It might have been about Jeannie Robertson, who was famous for her ballad backstory. She had this great account of what the ballad My Son David, her famous pièce de résistance, what that was really about. And she said basically that it was about two brothers called David and John, and there was some rivalry between them, and so John draws a sword on David, and David kills him, and that's where the ballad starts, who put the blood. So I've always been interested in that kind of idea. There's another brilliant backstory to Frank Prophet's version of Young Hunting, which he called Love Henry, and it was his version of the ballad is bizarre in itself and completely recomposed, I think. But then he had this backstory about how Love Henry got into bother because his girlfriend was basically into necrophilia and would lure young men to her castle and murder them, and then, as I can't remember exactly how Frank Prophet put it, but he said would make love to the dead body, which very, very odd backstory. And there's another very colourful story to a version of The Unquiet Grave. And again, this is from David Atkinson's extremely interesting essay, and it's the version from New Jersey, collected by an American collector called Herbert Halpert, which sounds like some kind of cartoon character. But he got The Unquiet Grave from a singer called Charles Grant. And I'm going to read out, in my vague impression of a New Jersey accent, what Charles Grant said about this ballad. You have to hear this. The ballad, incidentally, in Charles Grant's version was called Shakespeare's Ghost. You were asking me whether these characters ever had names, and this is one of the few, and he was actually called Shakespeare. So,
fantastic.
Charles Grant had learnt this off a fellow called Elwagon, and he said what Elwagon had told him about the song. He said that Shakespeare was a great lover. He married this woman. After he was married 2 or 3 years, there was another man fell in love with his wife, but she didn't care nothing about him. This man hired 4 or 5 men to kidnap Shakespeare. They took him up into a room and castrated him. Well, his wife said it didn't make any difference to her. She wanted to live with him. He said no, it couldn't be. He couldn't live with her no longer because he wasn't a man. He coaxed her to go into a convent, and after a while she consented and went in. 2 or 3 years later, he died. Shakespeare died pretty young. After he died, she got out of this convent. She used to go to his grave and pray to him to raise. She wanted to speak to him and see him. And this song was made up about that. This song is founded on fact.
Excellent. That's
amazing.
Great. Yeah, you get some traditional singers who like to claim that. Charlie Scamp, one of the Gypsy singers, was cousin of Phoebe Smith, and he there's some. I'm going to come to this when we talk about Barbara Allen with Vic Gammon in a few weeks, but there's a recording of him singing Barbara Allen that he says, "Now this is a true story. It happened to someone near Dover." And he does, and I gather from talking to people who knew him, saying that he seemed to sort of preface every song with, "Now this is a true story."
Yeah.
Like, is it really? You know. And the other thing that sprung to mind, friend of the podcast and previous podcast guest on Tamlin was Piers Corley, who listens to this. Hello, Piers. Has this theory that is it the 3 ravens of the first season, but also what's it called? Down in yon forest with the knight, the slain knight on the ground and the ravens and everything. He reckons the backstory to that is the song Bonnie George Campbell. Home came his good horse, but never came he. You know.
Well, certainly there isn't much to the ballad of Bonnie George Campbell, so it could probably do with a few extra verses about the corpse lying around and being visited by hawks and hounds, if you like that kind of thing.
Yes, and ravens. So yeah, there is I did hear about someone who tried to make a plot out of all of the child ballads, try and put all the child ballads in a certain order that to make it one story. But when you get to 36 Robin Hood ballads, 33, whatever it is, you can't really do that.
Yeah,
anyway,
I don't think I want to hear that long ballad.
No, not even I would choose
Gordon
to
Hall might have done it, of course.
Yes, well, thank God he didn't. Right then, traditional singers.
Traditional singers, good. Okay, I mean, we're lucky with this one in that there are some really good recordings of good singers and really important singers. So the first one I've picked is May Bradley, who has, again, a very striking modal version of the tune. I don't know if you've met May Bradley in your series so far, but she was this fantastic singer from Ludlow. She was the daughter of a gypsy called Esther Smith, who I think was from the same part of the country and had songs collected from her, probably by Ella Leather and maybe Vaughan Williams. So there's a great story about May Bradley and how she met the folk song collector Fred Hamer, who was the compiler of what you just called Gardener's Gay, Gardener's Gay as it's more generally known.
Yes.
So Fred Hamer was, well, two things you need to know about Fred Hamer. He was a musician. He played the fiddle for a Morris dance side, and he was blind. So what happened on this day in, I think, the late 1950s, there was a big Morris Ring convention at Ludlow. So Fred Hamer was in Ludlow, and he brought his fiddle with him to accompany whatever his Morris dance side was. And he went into a pub, and of course he couldn't see around him, but this voice, this woman's voice pipes up, "Why don't you give us a tune on that fiddle?" To which Fred Hamer replied, "Oh, I'm tired of playing the fiddle. Why don't you give me a song?" He couldn't see this woman at all, but suddenly she opens up with The Outlandish Night, which, I mean, if you're a folk song collector, you realise you've really struck gold there. Just completely random encounter in a pub. So that was May Bradley. So he visited her a number of times. She had some really interesting songs. The famous dark carol on Christmas Day, "It Happened So," when the Lord strikes a curse upon a ploughman for working on Christmas Day. She sang that to Fred Hamer. Rod Stradling said of his recording, of Hamer's recording, there's this really odd racket going on in the background, and when I listened to the recording of May Bradley singing on Christmas Day, I realised that the racket going on in the background is Morris dancing. You can hear melodeons and bells and feet banging on the ground, because it was recorded during this Morris dance convention in Ludlow that Fred Hamer was attending. So anyway, that was May Bradley, an amazing singer, and she has this. She recorded this twice. The Unquiet Grave. The second time, her voice sounds a bit older. There was several years between them, but she sings it very, very expressively in the second version, which I think is from 1966. And she also includes one stanza about the impossible tasks that we were talking about before. So that's number one for me.
Yes, that's on the. It's in the Garner's Gay book from the EFDS in 1967, and the recording is on the EFDSS album Garner's Gay, which is a lot of Fred Hamer recordings. May Bradley.
And there's also a Musical Traditions album of May Bradley as well.
That's right. Came out in 2010 called Sweet Swansea, which is 40 tracks of May Bradley. What more could you want?
Yeah, and several of them she sings the same song more than once. She does it on Christmas Day, and it's really quite interesting to compare one version with another.
That's right. There's quite a few that are like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. May Bradley. Who else?
Well, the next one is George Dunn. Interestingly, since we know that a lot of these broadsides were produced in Birmingham, Ludlow, where May Bradley came from, and George Dunn, who grew up in the Black Country, both of them are in this sort of general area not too far from Birmingham.
Oh, yeah.
George Dunn was another really interesting character who had a lot of stuff collected from him by Roy Palmer, who we all in the folk scene have a lot to thank for. So he grew up in a very deprived area and worked for all of his life in chain making, which was the local industry. And I thought this was, it was quite poignant in a way. He was a bit of a high flyer at school. He got on very well with his reading and writing, and as a result, his parents kept him on at school till the age of 13, which was a couple of years later than many of his other contemporaries stayed at school. So this is what life was like in a working class area of the Black Country at the time. So at the age of 13, he was working on the bellows that were heating the furnace where they were in the forge where they were making these chains, and he stayed there for 46 years, finally ending up as some kind of superintendent. So he learned lots of songs from his father. Again, there's a Musical Traditions double album, and there are 50 songs that George Dunn sang to Roy Palmer. this particular one is often described as a majestic performance. His rendition of the Unquiet Grave, similar tune to the one we've heard several examples of already, and he learnt this, as so many of his other songs, from his father. He has the note from A Dungeon Deep as well. So
That's
there
right.
you are.
Yeah.
That was George Dunn.
Yeah, that's if you're lucky to get it. It's on the Leader LP from 1973 called George Dunn. But then, yes, it's also on. Oh, it's another recording. Is on the Chainmaker, which is the two CD set from Rod Stradling's Musical Traditions label, which is two discs of 25, 26 tracks each, and pretty extensive stuff. There's a note in Roy Palmer and Rod Stradling noted in the booklet for that George Dunn explained the song, saying, "If you were troubled about the dead after they'd gone, you'd give the dead no rest." And that was his,
Yeah.
yeah, and the note for the Dungeon Deep, yeah, it's very good stuff. Yeah, I just want to bring up Jeff Wesley again briefly because we love Jeff Wesley.
Yeah.
If you're able to find it, it's on a CD, a very not a low budget. It's on a sort of independently released CD called Rum and Raspberry. Jeff Wesley, we've talked about him before on the Patreon. That's why we talked about him. We did the song Johnny Sands on the Patreon, picked by John Kirkpatrick, and I brought up Jeff Wesley there. It's on the same CD. Rum and Raspberry is all Jeff Wesley seen unaccompanied in front of an invited audience in 2005 at the White Lion in Wherwell in Hampshire. Jeff is he must be in his mid 80s by now, I think. Jeff, can't remember exactly how old he is now.
Yeah, he must be, yeah.
Yeah, but he was he was a farmer all his life, and I think his son took over the farm now. But as John Kirkpatrick said, there's some debate about whether you would classify him as a traditional singer or not. It's a bit of a grey area. Steve Roud's in a bit of a quandary over that one, but John Kirkpatrick said he sang to his cows. That's good enough for me. There you go. But he's a lovely, soft, sort of very smooth kind of voice, and I like it very much. And
Yeah, so do I.
on there
There's
is
one more from England I wanted to mention just for the sake of completeness. There's not a lot to it. It's only two verses, but that's a fella called William Ballinger, and that is on the Glostrad site that the late Gwilym Davis had a lot to do with setting up, and that was actually recorded by William Ballinger's grandson. And he sings it again to the pretty standard tune that we've been talking about. So that's the English recordings that I've managed to find, and you've added Jeff Wesley.
yeah.
There's another one out there, one of the Newfoundland ones, I don't know if this is one of the ones Bronson has, but there's a recording of a chap called Jim Keeping, and he was recorded by Kenneth Peacock, who again did some wonderful work collecting in Newfoundland. And that has a slight similarity to the tune that I believe Nick Dow is going to sing to you in his portion of it, so I'm not going to say anything more about that. And Jim Keeping is also the one who has the rather bizarre, impossible task about finding an egg from the billows so deep.
Oh yes, that's right.
So then, another slightly surprising one is Gene Ritchie. As I said, there's really not much trace of this ballad in the Appalachian Mountains at all. And it even made me think, I wonder if Gene Ritchie learned it out of a book of English folk songs, but she certainly didn't. She learned it from her uncle Jason. And again, when your listeners get the chance to hear that, it's similar to other Appalachian songs that I've heard. I can't exactly put my finger on which one, but it's very much like a mountain tune. You would never mistake it for any of these English tunes that we've been talking about. So that is well worth listening to, as Gene Ritchie always is. And lastly, we come to Stanley Robertson, who
Yes,
you've talked about many times on here.
indeed. So we said we would come back to Stanley Robertson, and here we are.
Here we are now. Stanley Robertson, I believe, called his version of the Unquiet Grave Young Kenneth. This is another one where the guy has a name.
Kenneth. That's so unsong-like in a way.
Yeah,
You can have Kenneth, I suppose, but it's like, where was it? It was in It might have been in Sweet William's Ghost, actually. There was all you get. It's William pretty much all the time, except one version in Child. It was called Philip. And we're not
Right.
entirely sure where Philip came from. And do we have any idea where Kenneth came from in this case, in terms of
None at
song wise,
all.
not character, but the song?
None at all. I mean, also, it just reminded me that the only other version of Willie's Lady, aside from the one in Child, is called Simon's Lady. And
Oh,
there's no reason it shouldn't be Simon, but we're so used to hearing about Willie's Lady, it just sounds really quite
well,
bizarre.
it's Simon, Philip, and Kenneth. They could all bandy together as a
Yes,
forgotten names in child ballads.
that's very good. So, Stanley Robertson's version, it's just like Frank Prophet's version of Young Hunting. It's as if somebody has been given a piece of school homework and been given a story and said, I want you to rewrite that completely in your own words without using any of the words of the original.
Okay, I see.
So Stanley Robertson doesn't have, as far as I know, and I've listened to it a couple of times, doesn't have any of the familiar phrases about your breath is heavy and strong and your time will not be long, or do you remember the garden where you and I used to walk? It's all, it's like it starts from ground zero. His tune is different from everybody else's. It's quite a jaunty sort of tune. And he starts off with a bit of backstory that's actually included in the ballad. The hero crosses the sea, and he's going to visit his true love. His ship docks. He goes to a house and finds actually his true love's sister, who tells him that Mary, here's the character named again, Mary is dead and buried beside the willow tree, and he should leave her alone. Let her be, says the sister. But he insists on going to the grave. The tears wet her shroud, as with those old folk tales. She rises from the grave, says, let me rest in peace, let your sorrows cease. And he says, I can't leave without a farewell kiss. So she responds, this is where we usually have the stanza about my breath is heavy and strong. She responds, my body smells of earthly slime, my skin moves with disease. If you kiss me on the lips, you'll ne'er see summer's breeze. What a fantastic
That
line
is
that is.
excellent.
Right. So anyway, he ignores her and he grabs her in a passionate embrace and kisses her, and then he dies just as the spring flowers are appearing. So her prophecy about not seeing summer's breeze was entirely accurate. So that's definitely one to look up.
Right, well, I'll definitely play a clip of that in the. There is a clip available, so I'll play that in a few minutes, along with a handful of others. Definitely George Dunn, May Bradley, Jeff Wesley, and we'll see what we can find. But
Yeah,
okay,
do play Gene Ritchie as well. That's quite an interesting one.
okay, we'll do. Right, let's leave things there. I think.
Yes.
But yeah, that's been really fascinating. I mean, it's a song that I was aware of, and I've heard many people sing. I'm very familiar with. I think John Kirkpatrick has always sung the May Bradley one, so I'm very familiar with that.
I think it was actually Sue Harris on one of their early albums sang the May Bradley ones. I don't know if John has taken it on himself since then. Probably has.
Oh, he did, yeah, because it's John Kirkpatrick. I mean, we'll talk about this with Nick Dale later on, but John Kirkpatrick and Sue Harris sang it on their Topic album. Among the many attractions at the show will be a really high class band. What a great name for an album! And then
Correct.
John did it solo on his CD Make No Bones in 2007. So
Ah, okay.
he
Yeah,
resurrected it.
well, as you say, it is not within my brief to talk about revival singers. Ah, revival
Those
singers.
singers not in this half of the episode, although it is on one of your albums
Yes.
from 1989. Dare I say it, the year of my birth.
Oh God.
Sorry,
Yes, I was
Brian.
already a veteran by then.
Yes, but there it is. Yes, we'll leave things there. That's been really brilliant and really fascinating to hear all that stuff. And looking at the spreadsheet, we've got you once more in this season in 6 episodes' time for where you have the entire episode where we can talk about revival singers, except there aren't any except you for that particular song. But we'll come to that in
Oh
mid.
yeah, I thought you were talking more generally. Like there are no other revival singers worth their salt except.
Except you. But well, this is also true. But in terms of people who sung the song we're going to come to in 6 weeks' time, it appears to be you, and that's why you are the solitary guest for that episode. But we'll come to that in a few weeks' time. Otherwise, yes, thank you ever so much for coming on and doing this again. It's been lovely to see you again. And
Yeah, it's been fun.
yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, Matt. Bye for now.
A huge thanks again to Brian Peters for providing us with the history of the Unquiet Grave. As ever, at this, the halfway point in the episode, we're going to listen to a few different versions of this song sung by traditional singers. So what you're going to hear now is Cold Blows the Wind from George Dunn, and then May Bradley, and then The Unquiet Grave from Stanley Robertson and Jeff Wesley.
Cold blows the winds over my true love. Cold are the drops of rain. I never had but one true love. In the greenwood he was slain. But I'll do as much for my true love as any young lass can do. I'll sit and I'll weep right o'er his grave for a 12-month and one day.
Now it's cold, blows the drops over my true love. Cold blows the drops of rain. I never had but one true love, and in the grave he lies. I will do as much for my true love as any young woman could. I will sit and I will weep all over his grave for a 12-month and one day. When the 12-month and one day had passed, this young man he arose. What makes thy weep all over my grave? For I cannot take my support.
Young Kenneth, he came o'er the main and out a Saltgate sea. Nae matter if he was coming hame to wad Bonnie Mary. Blithe was his heart as a ship had berthed to the quay o' the harbour shore. His sea legs soon grip firm the land as he made for his true love's door. But when he came to Mary's, her sister came to view, and every tear she let down fa on him the day she grew. For Mary lies in yonder hill by the side of the walnut tree. It's there she is by night and day, so you mun let her be. But I canna yield her to the grave without a kiss to gie. So he picked up the roddens by the light of the moon, and he's chanted earnestly.
The wind is blow today, my love, a few small spots of rain. I only ever had but one true love, in cold ground she is laid. I'll do as much for my true love as any young man may. I'll weep and I'll mourn all on her grave for 12 months and a day. 12 months and a day were past. A voice spoke from the deep. Who is that sits all on my grave and will not let me sleep?
And you can find the links to all those tracks and the albums from which they came in the show notes. Just want to say a brief word about our Patreon. If you are really, really, really enjoying In the Roud and feel able to give us a bit of financial support, then please do head on over to patreon.com/intheroud, and you can sign up for either £5 per month or £10 per month and receive a wide variety of bonus content. It's been going since October of 2024, so there's well over a year's worth of extra songs and other episodes too on a variety of subjects. Most of what we do there is mini seasons called Singer's Choice, where we get one singer guest on for 3 episodes, and it's their choice of 3 songs. That way, it's like applying a random number generator to the Roud index. You know, we get much higher Roud numbers. Songs I'll never ever get to cover on the main podcast, I suppose. But this week's episode on Patreon is one of our Spotlight episodes, and it's our second ever region Spotlight. I'll be joined by returning podcast guest Andy Turner, and we'll be looking at song collecting in the region of Kent. So that's up tomorrow, which is the 26th of February. And then throughout the year, we're going to have loads more Singer's Choice mini-seasons and some more Spotlight episodes too. So, as I say, if you feel so moved to support the podcast financially, then please do head on over to patreon.com/intheroud. That's patreon.com/intheroud. But for now, on to the second half of this episode, and to chat more about the Unquiet grave and many other things besides, I was joined for this episode by singer and guitarist Nick Dow. Well, hello and a big welcome to In the Roud, Nick Dow. Hello.
Hello, glad to be here.
Hi, I'm glad you're glad to be here. How are you? How's things?
No complaints. Everything seems to be all right. The roof's on and the bills are paid, so that'll do. And I woke up this morning as well. That was a bonus.
Excellent. I feel the same way, but I always say, the fridge is full and the car's got some diesel in it. Therefore, I can eat and I can travel, and that's what I need.
And that's perfect as long as it's a diesel car.
Yeah.
You missed that, didn't you? Never mind. Carry on.
Yeah, it's nice to see you. I mean, it's been 3 days since we saw each other in person. We're recording this on the 17th of February, and 3 days ago we were both at the Broadside Day conference hosted by the Traditional Song Forum at the Sheffield University. So Indeed. All I had to do was drive for 15 minutes and get a tram for 15 minutes, and I was there. But you had to travel further.
Indeed, yeah, from Lancashire.
Lancashire, that's right. But yes, it was good to see you there, and a very good presentation you gave too. Just give us a very quick, give our listeners a very quick taste of what you presented.
Well, I was asked to give my memories of a family print shop, as in our family print shop, and the reason that was relevant to broadsheets is not because I'm not that old that I was around when they were being printed ballads. It's just that my grandfather and my father were I suppose Luddites when it came to printing. They weren't interested in actually updating the shop, and it hadn't really been that updated and since the 19th century, except it has got electricity. That's about it. So we were a letterpress printing firm, which is exactly the same way that the broadsheets were printed, and both were grandfather and my father were master printers, typesetters, in the old-fashioned way. So I had first-hand knowledge of setting type and learning to read backwards and upside down, which I did when I was approximately 8 years old, and also working a letterpress printing machine, which was not bad really. So I talked for quite some time about that and told a few stories about what sort of things we used to print, and then related them to the broadsheets. And I found a great deal of fun actually finding where the broadsheet printers had gone entirely wrong and what they'd done to and the misspellings and general bad proofreading, which made quite a few people laugh.
Yes, no, it was it was very informative and very entertaining in that respect, and yeah. So before we get going on to the song in question of the day, as the song we've heard from Brian earlier, give us a bit of Nick Dow history. How did you your sort of musical upbringing, I suppose, and how did you come to folk music, or did folk music find you?
Yes and no. I took the classic route into folk music, and this has been well documented and signposted over the years. I started off with jazz and blues, and interestingly enough, when I was in my teens, I used to hike up to London and go to the 100 Club, which is still going to this day, 100 Oxford Street, where I saw a lot of very, very interesting people in jazz. Some of the old greats like Kenny Ball and even the Bill Nile jazz men and all the rest of it. But what I did see was one of the very last performances of the great blues singer Son House, with whom I was unable to talk because he was being mobbed by people, but I sat in front of him approximately about 8 feet away from him while he played the blues. He was on there twice actually, in 1971 I think it was, or 72, and I went to both gigs and stood in front of it, or sat in front of him, and watched him play. And that was my first exposure, if you like, to a traditional singer. I started drifting off to my local folk club by then, but I had no information on traditional folk, so I was playing blues. That's what I knew. That was the information. There was a big blues boom in the late 60s and early 70s, and it was still going strong while I was at school. So it actually went in that way, and then of course I was exposed to the tradition, and I listened to some of these people, and I was amazed. Not actually so much by the songs themselves at that time, because it took me a long time to learn the language, and that is obviously a problem for a lot of people, really, with who don't relate to traditional music. But I found, in fact, that once I began to understand the songs, I was amazed how relevant they were. And I thought, hang on, this song's an really old song, but it's just as good as the blues. It's just as modern as what's on the radio in its own way, and that astonished me. But I didn't actually get the nerve together to sing it until really one song I actually fell in love with, and that was actually, would you believe, it was the tune I fell in love with, The Curragh of Kildare. I thought, what a phenomenal tune. Absolutely lovely tune. That is so, I was going to say romantic, if you like, but it is really. It's that sort of a song. That's so wonderful. And I found myself humming it. And I thought, well, it might be an idea, you fool, if you went away and learnt the words. So that's exactly what I did. I hadn't got a clue what I was singing about, but and those in those days the words were only something to carry the tune, which is really a lot of the way that we were asked to listen to pop music, especially rock and roll. I mean, nobody actually cares what they're singing about much, although I could argue on that one a bit. It's just something to carry the tune, and then that these words began to grow on me, and I began to wonder what this is. And of course, I then discovered the Penguin Book of English Folk Songs, or as we used to call it, Songs for Singing Penguins. And having read that, I read Bert Lloyd's introduction, and off I went. So I suddenly, I then became a little more learned in the subject of folk music, and then I wasn't interested in doing anything else. I did do, but I was just fascinated by it.
Great, and you play guitar as well, don't you? That's part of your thing.
Yeah, well, I actually found one. That's how I got into playing guitar, on top of a wardrobe.
Oh,
And this was at a relative's house, and it had been up there for ages. And so I didn't know anything about how you tuned a guitar up, and it wasn't very good guitar. So I tuned it to a chord and started playing songs with one finger, doing it up it, and trying to write songs, all sorts of nonsense. And my mother had a rush of blood to the head and thought he might be able to play, so she actually got me one that I could tune up correctly and had the right number of strings on, and that was the end of that. I never looked back really. I just took to it. Once I'd sat in front of a piano and figured out how to tune it up. I'd never heard of guitar tuners, and there was certainly weren't electronic ones like there are nowadays.
yeah.
But I had no trouble in doing that, and I just breezed through it. I was able to tune up, and then somebody taught me how to play the intro to The House of the Rising Sun. That's where I started, The House of the Rising Sun, with the A minor and all the rest of it. So I thought this was the most devastating thing anybody had ever played on the guitar, and I had to learn it and play it. So, but as I say, one thing led to another. But I've got a rather strange style of playing because I learnt the guitar as right-handed, but I'm actually left-handed.
Right, sure.
So it was, but there weren't such things as left-handed guitars either.
Well, no, I have a friend who is she's left-handed and consequently plays the mandolin left-handed, but she also plays the violin, and she plays the violin right-handed. Because if you want to be in an orchestra, you can't play a left-handed violin. They all have to be the same direction.
It's amazing. I mean, this is it. I'm actually, in that respect, ambidextrous. When it comes to writing, I'm able to write with both hands. Better with my left than my right, but I can actually write backwards with my right hand, meet in the middle.
I was going to say you're left-handed, right-handed, backwards and upside down from your days
Yes, absolutely.
in the print
Crackers,
shop.
isn't it? Yeah, I mean, when it comes to typesetting, it beats standing on your head, you see, so I just learned to do it that way.
That's fair enough, yeah. And incidentally, having just had a brief look it up, The House of the Rising Sun is Roud number 6393.
There you go.
So-
I didn't know that. I've learned something already.
Learnt a piece of useless information, the Roud number.
Oh, he's useless at all. No.
Well, no, I've have a thing now of sometimes when I do gigs with my trio Culverake, I do I just tell the audience what the Roud number is, and it makes no difference to them whatsoever, but it usually gets a laugh.
Yeah, it is, as long as I know what the Roud number is, Roud numbers are.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why it's pointless in a way. But yeah, so it's 6393, House of the Rising Sun. I don't do the history of that one, but it's only collected in America, and with the podcast, I'm going through the Roud Index numerically from 1 onwards, and this being number 51. I will never, in my lifetime, get to House of the Rising Sun, 6393. Worked out that if I do this for 40 years, I'll get to Roud 1200. So I won't. But That's why the Patreon
Wonder how
exists.
Steve managed it, isn't it?
Well, yes, he can. All he's doing is adding new numbers, whereas I'm creating 2 to 3 hour episodes per song. It's a lot more work in some respects, but yeah, that's why the Patreon exists, is so I can cover songs with higher round numbers. Maybe one day one of my singer guests on the Patreon will pick House of the Rising Sun, and we can cover round 6393. That's a side note. But today we're looking at Unquiet Grave, Cold Blows the Wind, Roud 51, Child Ballad number 78. Do you have any sort of particular memory of not necessarily the version that you sing now, but the first time you ever came across any version of song? Do you remember a time before you were aware of this song?
Yeah, it was at my local folk club. Funnily enough, I was discussing my local folk club with Dave Burland not so long ago, because he was one of the first guests I saw there. That was a club that's now no longer in existence, and it is the Rising Sun at Catford's the one I used to run. Hang on a second, what was it called? The Bird in Hand at Forest Hill.
Oh, I've heard of that. I've heard of that
Have
one.
you?
Yeah.
Yes. The Bird in Hand at Forest Hill was run by Dave Marshall, who I saw a couple of years ago, and I converse with every now and again. He's still out there kicking a ball, and that particular club was the most the best, one of the best clubs in South London, and it had an array of guests that looked like a who's who of folk music. And at that club, I saw Dave Burnand, I saw Peter Bellamy, I saw Tony Rose, I saw Leon Rogerson. I missed Martin Carthy, which I was most annoyed about, but I had a gig myself. And the list carries on. Chris Foster, who ended up staying at my house, except the list just goes on and on and on. And they all turned up sooner or later at the Bird in Hand in Forest Hill, the Dransfields, I remember. And
Wow. Yeah.
I was able to see some great. I tell you who, though, you mentioned him earlier on, and that's Sandra Kerr.
Oh, yes.
She used to turn up with, I've forgotten the name of her pipe player, small pipes player. It was, but who used to sit in with her. It's gone out of my head. That's this four-letter word called age. Anyway, that was a real eye opener. Plus, Terry Yarnell came down and sang the versions. I think was put together by Ewan McCall of Sheath and Knife,
Oh, yeah.
which was breathtaking to me. I thought, this is incredible, and I promptly went away and learned it. And so it is. And then when Dave Burland was there, he turned up with Richard Thompson, who was sat at the back of the room, and nobody recognised him. Well, I thought that looks like Richard Thompson, but it can't be. He's on an LP, so he won't be down in the local fan club. Anyway, so it goes, and that's when I first heard the Unquiet Grave. Now, who it was who sang it? The answer was just somebody got up and sang from the floor and did that song.
Right, yeah.
And for the life of me, I can't remember who it was. And it was the first time that I'd heard that song or anything like it. And so I went away somewhat puzzled as to why anybody would actually have a loud conversation with the grave and expect to get an answer. And of course, then my only source of information was the cover of an LP if it happened to have it on, because I didn't know where to go. I'd never been to Cecil Sharp House. All that came later. So I thought, well, where do I get this? If somebody wrote something on the back of an LP, I took it, number one, as being verbatim. And of course, I discovered Bert Lloyd that way through Penguin and through reading his notes on the back of LPs. And so, slowly but surely, my interest was spiked in traditional music, and then of course I decided it was an opportunity for me to follow music as a living, and which I did, teaching guitar and all the rest of it. I mean, those days you could make a living out of music, not so much nowadays. And then one thing led to another, and I got elected as one of the residents of the Great Dingles Folk Club, which was there was the Troubadour in the 1960s, and it was Dingles Folk Club in the 1970s. And I mean, the lineup there, I mean, it was started by John Kirkpatrick, who played in the Dingles Chili Bomb Band, with Chris Foster. And I more or less replaced Chris Foster, although there was, I think, Keith Dignan came first. The other residents were Sam Stevens and Anne Lennox Martin, Jim McGeehan, he was the other, Packy Byrne and Bonnie Shalgene were there regularly, and
oh wow,
they were elected to the, and of course that led to my first LP, and the rest,
and it carries on from there.
Yeah.
So the version of the Unquiet Grave that you sing, then, where does that? Where did you get that from?
Well, the same place as everybody else, to my surprise. I didn't actually realise that until I went to the Mainly Norfolk websites and found out that everybody else who got the same book as me, and that was the English folk singer called the English folk singer, which was Sam Richards and Tish Stubbs, as were in those days, and it's in there. And of course, it was collected. That particular version was collected by Gardner from. Do you remember the name of the singer? You were collected from? Yeah, you've been listening to Brian. I'm not letting you get away with this everywhere.
I'm not meant to be answering questions here.
All right. Well, I should fill you in. It was James Brown.
James Brown.
So he stopped being on tour and singing and came and sang to Gardner. You didn't know that, did you?
I must admit, I haven't actually got the copy of the English folk singer. I've got a copy of the Scottish folk singer on my shelf, but not the English folk singer. So I need to fill that gap on my shelves.
Well, it's worth it actually. There are some interesting songs in there. They're not all traditional songs, and
That's right. The same with the Scottish folk singer. There's some songs in there that I found weren't in the Roud index, and I was about to tell Steve Roud, and then I realised, yeah, this book isn't the sort of thing Steve Roud would go through, and therefore those songs wouldn't have Roud numbers. So, yeah, it's not quite just
no Roud numbers in there in the English folk singer at all. But
no.
What attracted me to the song when I viewed the notation was the fact it was in 6/8.
Right, yeah.
And there's very few versions of Unquiet Grave that are in 6/8. So I had quite a relationship with the song. I ended up collecting it as well.
And I've just, while you were saying that, I had a quick look through my copy of Bronson, just in terms of tunes that are in different time signatures. And yeah, there's a good handful or so of 6/8 time signature melodies for this in Bronson, but it does seem mostly to be sort of 4/4 and common time.
You've impressed me again, because you must be the only person who can read Bronson quickly.
Well, the thing is, I've got a very handy PDF copy of Bronson.
Yeah, it's a nice useful, isn't it?
If you open it up in like some kind of PDF reader, like Adobe Acrobat Reader, then whoever put this PDF together has put bookmarks in. So if you press bookmarks, you can actually just click on the Child 78 and it takes you to that page. So I didn't have to flip through to find the right song. It's very quick to find the song you want in Bronson.
Where would we be without a search engine? I know. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. So there are a fair few 6/8 tunes, but it's mostly 4/4 and common time, I think.
Yeah, it's mostly common time, yeah.
Yeah. And so I know that you, as well as providing us with a new unaccompanied recording of the version you sing, which we're going to hear at the end of this episode, you've also provided us with a recording of a traditional singer, a guy called Sam Gorman. Tell us the story with with this recording?
Right. Well, that recording and about 50 or 60 other songs were provided as a form of payment. Now you're interested, aren't you? Yes. What actually happened was I've been, I've married a Romany gypsy, and so consequently I've been involved with the gypsy folk for decades. And my abilities or my grounding in lettering when I was a young kid led me to take some sign writing training. So I was an old-fashioned sign writer, and then branched out into decorative painting, gilding, and things like that, which of course led me to be asked to paint a gypsy caravan,
Ah,
which I did. And for many years I was painting for the lads, teaching a few of them how to paint, and showing them the basics of sign writing. And I was working over in Blackpool at an area. Gypsy folk have been in Blackpool for generations. In fact, the descendants of the 19th century travellers and gypsies and travellers, and there's a difference, by the way, now run the pleasure beach in Blackpool.
right.
And so they are all been on a place called the Martin Moss in Blackpool, and I was over there, and I've been asked to put the canvas on a wagon for them, which is quite a specialist job. And I'll not go into that; I'll bore you to death. But basically, you've got to do it right, so it actually is waterproof, and is able to go slack in the summer and tight in the winter. And so I did this, and one of the travelling lasses called Mary Lee came out to see me and said, "Oh, you've done a good job on that. How much do we owe you?" And I said, "I tell you what, Mary, why don't you send me one of your songs?" And she said, "Certainly not," and went off and did the washing up. So I was left laughing, just finishing off the job. And she came wandering back with a plastic bag. And I said, "What's in there?" She said, "Oh, yeah, have this." So I said, "What is it?" She said, "It's us." And I said, "What do you mean it's us?" And she said, "Oh, I thought I was going to get the best of the wolf tones or something like that. But in fact, no. It was 4 homemade CDs. And she said, "Well, back in 1971, we had a Grundig tape recorder, and we were on the road, and when this guy come down with this Grundig tape recorder and taped us. Now his name was Ian Wood, nothing to do with Ian Woods, Ian Wood, and he was going out with one of the younger lasses of the camp, and he turned this on. It was battery driven, reel to reel, and taped all their songs. And so they gave them to me. They didn't know what to do with them. So one of the younger lads, some 3 or 4 years earlier, had put them all on CD, CDR, and they'd had an unholy scratching and everything. But anyway, I listened to these songs, couldn't believe my ears, and so I went back to him and said, "Do you want me to get some of these published?" And they said, "How do you mean?" He said, "Well, we can take some of the singers." He said, "No, it's out there. They're our voices. We don't want them for the general public." So I said, "Would you like me to tell me who the singers are?" And Mary Lee was on there when she was about 22, and also Sam Gorman and Bartley Gorman. And these were the in her branch of the family, Wilsons, Gormans, and Lees. So she married Walter Lee, who's my best friend. And John Howson came down and took him over there, and he was going to put him out on Veteran.
Oh, yes.
But they decided against it. So I said to them, "Well, would you let me just use the recordings for one of my books?" They said, "Yeah." And they were so keen on that Mary actually wrote a short introduction to the book. So if you look at Secret Stream 2 or Secret Stream 1, Secret Stream 2, she does a little introduction there. She's one of the more literate gypsies over there, and that was lovely. And so I then ploughed through all these recordings and took some good ones from it. So the answer is I sort of recollected the songs
Right.
because otherwise they were going to end up in a bin or
Right.
just generally ignored. And it allowed me to have a vast collection of songs that a lot of which have been unpublished. And Steve Turner's taken a couple of them and singing them on his new CD, which is called, it's got a wonderful name, his CD, A Host of Furious Fancies. There you are. Very Shakespearean, that, I think. And he's done a couple of them, of the songs from Secret Stream, and also from Southern Songs too, which is the other book. So that's how that came about. So what you're actually hearing isn't my recording, it's the one that was made by a gentleman who took no interest in the recordings after he made them at all.
Yeah.
His name was Ian Wood. He just got him to sing into a Grundig tape recorder.
Oh, there we go.
71. So that's quite an interesting story.
Yeah, it's very, very good indeed. And let's hear that recording now.
Oh, what can I do for my true love? For to bring him back to me, you must go and kneel down by his grave for 12 months and 1 day. You must get a nettle out of a dark dungeon. You must get the water out of the stone, and the milk out of some fair maid's breast, which babe she has never had none. Now he got a narrow out of a dark dungeon. She got the water out of the stone, but the milk out of some fair maid's breast, oh, the milk which he never got none.
And that was Sam Gorman singing The Unquiet Grave. Yeah,
It's really a
fantastic.
fragment of it, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
all the whole thing.
No, not at all.
But it does have the taking milk from a maiden's breast where child she has none, and various other impossibilities.
Yes.
In fact, it's the whole song, apart from the first verse, is a list of impossibilities. So
That's right. Yeah, a lot of folk songs all to do with impossible tasks or riddles or things, crops up more than you expect in these folk songs. So the version that you sing then, we mentioned it from the English folk singer, have you done any editing to that, or is what you sing pretty much what you came across and learnt in the first place?
it was literally out of the book. Yes, it is. It is those verses within the book, and I think I did. It's a while back that I actually started singing the song, but I think I went to Vaughan Williams' library online and checked the original notation that Gardner made, just to find out if Tish Stubbs and Sam Richards had done any editing.
Right, of course, yeah. Always. That's one of Steve Roud's things to me. He's always said, never assume anything is correct. Always go back to the previous source. If you found it in a book and the book says where they got it from, you go back to where they got it from and have a look and see what was missed out or not.
I think actually all the same thing can be said about tunes as well. Because a lot of times you'll find that it's worth checking the sources that are attributed to a tune. And the problem, though, you're going to find if you're going to get into doing research of that nature is where do you draw the line? And I'll actually give you an example
Sure.
of that. There was, what the hell was I? Yes, that's right. I was looking at one particular song that I traced back to a tune that was around in the 19th century, or at least in sheet music form, called We Be Three Poor Mariners, to find that in fact that in its turn originated with good old Dowland in the Deuteromelia.
Right.
So suddenly, all of a sudden, this one song in the mouth of a 19th century singer in Dorset or somewhere like that had actually it had percolated down from the dizzy heights of the Deuteromelia, and don't ask me how. I mean, the one thing that old Bert Lloyd said that can be taken seriously is that both art music and folk music are branches of the same tree, and
Sure.
it's true they are. And a number of I've just fairly recently I've been looking at the tune for a song which was a song that was shared its tune with the Young Henry the Poacher, I think it was, or yeah, that one, and that one has shared it. It is provoked from a French original, and that itself can be traced back. But I found what for the purposes of actual note writing in terms of publication, I drew the line at the French version. I'm not going back further to try into the depths of French folk music to find where that came from,
No,
because
indeed,
in
yeah.
the end, it'll give you about another 15 versions. So you have to be aware that you're going to draw the line somewhere as to how far you go back. Otherwise, you suddenly realise that the image of a classless global form of music was always there and not something that was wished for.
Indeed, indeed. Um, Thinking about your version of the Unquiet Grave in terms of the words, which impossible tasks are there in your version? Because they vary, don't they?
They do vary, yes. But I think, do you know, I don't think there are any impossible tasks. You're talking about the Gorman version or the Brown version?
The one that you sing.
What I sing is Brown. No, there aren't any impossible tasks in it.
Oh, okay. No,
None whatsoever. No, it's all lamenting by the grave, hoping for
right.
an answer.
So there's none of the get me a whatever from the dungeon and all
Yes,
that.
and then wonder
Yeah,
how you do it. Yeah, no, it's
water out of a stone and milk out of a fair maid's breast, and
fair May breast and all the rest of it. Yeah, no, there's none of that in that version. I
oh,
wasn't aware of that, but it wasn't in that version. And the other thing is that I'm never been a great lover. You're gonna hate me for saying this, but I've never been a great lover of extremely long ballads.
that's fair.
Simply,
No, no, totally fair.
because I always prefer. When it comes to child ballads, the usually what happened that I always think of them in. I say class is not a word I like using, but in terms of upstairs and downstairs. The upstairs is where the ballads came from. Maybe as far back as I was talking, the Deuteromelia or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
from that period, and a lot of them were penned, as Steve Gardner has probably already told you, in the 18th century. But maybe that's an exaggeration, maybe earlier than that. But the motifs in the ballads as well go back further than that. Especially you mentioned earlier on about the outlandish night. The motifs in that can go back to prehistory, but in actual fact, I consider them to be in their long form something that happened upstairs. And what usually happens is those doing all the work downstairs had a listen. You know what those two are singing about up there? There's a good bit in that where somebody gets into his master's or mistress's bed. Really, I think they called the ballad Glasgerian. But it was. I know the good bit is where he gets into the mistress's bed. Oh, I bet he was a sailor. Yeah, he probably was a sailor. So then, next thing we get is Jack the Sailor seducing a woman
Sure.
who has a piece of string hanging out the window and all the rest of it. And there is a connection to the ballad Glasgerian, although Steve will probably disagree with me totally on that. And so consequently, I would tend to go for the, if you like, the folk version rather than the original. With the exception of a very few traditional singers and the really long versions of ballads, I don't know if they were ever sung in all their entirety.
Yeah, sure.
I very much doubt it because it demands so much time that unless it was for a specific occasion, you're going to be likely to just do a shorter song so somebody else can have a go at singing. It's the same, I mean, most people say, in sing-arounds today don't want a 97-verse ballad if they can possibly avoid it because, hang on a minute, we're all supposed to be singing here, not just you.
Indeed, I have this. I have that as well because I do sing some long ballads, but I have to pick and choose my moment as to when. I don't want to bombard people with them, but I've got to think. Right, well, I probably could get away with one here because I've got the time or the right people listening who might be interested. But yeah, Steve Roud has always he's talked a couple of times on the podcast. I've mentioned it at least about the fact that the further you go back, the longer the songs are, and it's Steve says something about it's when you get to the Victorian era that a lot of these songs start to get whittled down a bit into some more palatable length versions.
Well, we were talking about broadsides. That's where they ended up probably, and reason that was they weren't so long is because they wanted to sell them.
You need to fit as
More
many you
likely.
can on the page.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
So, but I mean, there were still some motifs from the likes of the Outlandish Night.
yeah,
They're absolutely fascinating. That I mean, the once again, according to Bert, you never know. The thing was Bert. He had a habit of his research was part fiction and part truth. With Bert, unfortunately, so he says that's the motif of the not the song, but the actual motif within the ballad of the woman who's about to be drowned by the knight from whom she turns the tables. At one point in one version, lies down on the ground with her head in the outlandish knight. We'll call him the evil knight's lap and then looks up into the tree above to see his blood-stained weapons above her head, dripping blood down upon the ground,
right.
and suddenly realise this bloke isn't as nice as I thought he was. I think he might be a psychopath. Whereupon this is all is revealed. And according to, if you look on folk song in England, evidently that motif of the woman with her head in a lap looking up to this tree with the weapons hanging on it was found in the 12th century in a church somewhere in Eastern Europe and existed prior to that. So the motifs themselves, some of them also, of course, about mythical talking birds, which have been rationalised into parrots. There's Steve says that's all musical, and he's probably right. But there is another school of thought that says that the mythical talking bird was in fact a oracle.
Yeah,
And
and we've covered all this with because we did an episode on the Outlandish Knight, and that was all mentioned there. Yeah, the Oracle and
with the
all that
golden claws and a ruby beak and all the rest.
and the or the Oracle or the symbol of someone's conscience, and all that sort of thing. It's
To this
fascinating.
day, we talk about a little bird told me.
Exactly, yeah. What's it called? What's his name? Jiminy Cricket and Pinocchio. There you go. The voice of the conscience. Anyway,
By the way, that little bird told me. Evidently, that was there's alleged that is actually it goes back to the First World War, where
right.
they had carrier pigeons giving messages.
Ah.
You know, I'm full of it, aren't I? Shall I just allow you to talk?
But yeah, and yeah, you say sort of motifs that go back throughout history. I mean, with this song, and in fact, the previous Roud number, which we covered at the end of the last season, Sweet William's Ghost, and there are loads of other songs with revenants, with ghosts from beyond, people from beyond the grave coming back to spend another night with their true love or something. It's another very well used motif, isn't it?
Oh yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And, so I mean, that's how I actually came across the song, though. Really, quite just hearing somebody sing it and wanting to know a bit more about it. And do you know, I can't for the life of me remember what the notes were in the book. That so easily sorted. He goes across the room with Steve Roud's ability as a librarian. He lied.
Yeah.
And see if he could actually find the book. And here it is, the English folk singer.
There we go. Ta-da!
That particular book is he doesn't do the notes at the end in alphabetical order, which is slightly problematic. You have to find the song first, and then he has the notes on the same page.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, so I've got the notes here for the Unquiet Grave from the English folk singer, which incidentally was published. I don't know if it's still available, by Collins, which is quite a well-known and good publisher. Yes, The Unquiet Grave, sung by James Brown, as I said. Details unknown, collected by George Gardner, pre-1910. So it was all a bit dodgy as to when it was taken. The odds on it was probably around the time he was collecting, which was 1908, and 1907 or 8. And whoever wrote these notes, it's probably Sam Richards. Mourn for the dead, but not overmuch, or they'll not be able to rest in the grave. This simple folklore belief is embodied in this song, which Child included in the English and Scottish popular ballads, but which would more accurately be termed a lyric. Okay. Bronson speculates on good evidence that it might be from the end of the 15th century, but also points out that no definite versions are known until the 19th century. The number of times we've heard that, I bet you've heard it more than me.
Yeah,
there's no
that's
definite
cropped up a bit.
versions in the 19th century, but it could be from the 15th. So this is basically a set of notes that said we haven't got a clue where the singer was. We don't know when it was collected. We've no idea whether it's older than the 19th century, but there's lots of places where there's a book.
Well, there we go.
Doesn't really count as research, does it?
No. Well, they can listen to the first half of this episode and Brian Peters done all the work.
Yeah.
So there we go. But yeah, that's that's some, and even, I mean, yeah, some books like that are rather unhelpful. But even the Child Ballads collection, as the English and Scottish popular ballads compiled by Child, it'll sometimes just say he's taken a text from the Motherwell manuscript, and it just says from the recitation of so and so, who learnt it from a nurse 70 years earlier. Right, yes. And that's not entirely helpful either, really. But we work with what we've got.
Child was actually didn't like the people who provided him with the ballads very much. He didn't consider them to be particularly important. I mean, that's only an opinion, and as far as I can gather,
yeah,
he actually wasn't remotely interested in the tunes. As far as he was concerned, he was interested in literary Excellence.
It's the literary aspect and the poetic aspect rather than
Literary and
anything
poetic
musical or
excellence. Yeah.
yeah, indeed. But we
So,
these days are interested also in the musical side of things, which brings us strangely in some strange segue onto other people who have sung this song on the folk revival. I have a list here of recommendations for people who want to hear this song sung by other people. Obviously, we're going to hear in a few minutes. We're going to hear your version unaccompanied. But if people want to check out other versions of this song, I can highly recommend the following. I can highly recommend Shirley Collins, who recorded the song 3 times. It's on her 1959 LP called False True Lovers, which I have a copy of, and it's lovely. There's an EP she made in 1959, 1960 called Shirley Collins English Songs. It's a 4-track EP. And then 1967, very, very famous album of hers called The Power of the True Love Knot. And it's on there, middle of side A, if you have the LP itself. So I imagine that's her on the banjo. I think there might be some of Dolly Collins' organ, maybe. I can't remember. Haven't heard it in quite a while. But
she was one of the few revivalists I can listen to.
there you go.
Did you ever meet her?
Oh, Shirley, I know her very well. Yeah, I've known her all my life. Yeah, yeah, she's lovely. She's absolutely lovely.
Isn't she?
Yeah, I'll always take the time to listen to her singing and talking about things. But and on the Power of the True Love Knot, she plays that odd instrument she used to play, which was kind of a dulcimer with a 5-string banjo neck.
Neck on it, yes, I remember it very well. Yeah,
made by a guy called John Bailey, and a very famous instrument that now owned by a musician called Ian Keary, who lives in Sussex and plays in a ceilidh band with my dad. What a link! There we go. And Ian was the producer of Shirley's most recent 3 albums, those 3 new albums she made.
yes, come on.
So he's a very good friend of hers, and he has that. It's got a name like a Dulcie banjo or something. It's got some kind of funny name like that, but it's just an odd dulcimer. But Shirley played that on Power of the True Love Knot for the Unquiet Grave. So we got that. We have some previous podcast guests, quite a few actually. 2 seasons ago, we had an episode on Captain Wedderburn's courtship, and our singer guest for that one was Barbara Snape of Peter and Barbara Snape, who are a fantastic duo. Barbara is a fantastic singer, and they've recorded it twice. That they made an album in 2011 called Revel and Rally, and it's in there. And then they also sang it again on an album that came out last year, 2025, called Such Times as These. I'll always recommend people listening to Barbara Snape singing songs because she's fantastic. Back in season 1, we had Hazel Askew on the podcast for the Two Sisters episode, and in her duo with her sister Emily, the Askew sisters, they did the Unquiet Grave on a 2014 album called In the Air or the Earth. And that's a melody collected by Cecil Sharp in Somerset in 1904, and the text has been sort of put together from various versions. But Hazel's singing is great. John Kirkpatrick, we've had John Kirkpatrick on the podcast for the Lord Bateman episode, our longest ever episode of In the Roud. And John sang it with Sue Harris, or rather Sue Harris sang it with John Kirkpatrick on that excellent album with a long title. Among the many attractions at the show will be a really high-class band. That's Sue singing the tune with John singing the harmony. But then John Kirkpatrick sang it solo on his 2007 album, Make No Bones, and that's the May Bradley version from Shropshire. That's John's real focus a lot of the time is on Shropshire collected things.
I was quite pleased with that album because he's got a song on there that I collected as well.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, it's always trust John to come up with some great versions of things. I'm vaguely going in chronological order, but not quite here. we have, this is a tease for next week, next week's episode 2 of this season. The singer guest will be Frankie Armstrong.
Wow.
Absolutely fantastic singer, and she'll be coming on to talk about Little Musgrave and Lady Barnard. But 1971 topic album of hers called Lovely on the Water, she does a version of the Unquiet Grave, which I don't know where she got the words from, but the tune is a Vaughan Williams one collected in Hertfordshire. So I may even ask her about that briefly next week, just as a side note, before we get on to talk about the Little Musgrave stuff. 3 more, very briefly skim through. Nancy Kerr learnt it from Sandra Kerr, her mother, and sang it solo, I think, on the first of the 2 albums Nancy made with Eliza Carthy as their duo back in the early 1990s. It's on the album called Eliza Carthy and Nancy Kerr, and she learned that from her mother, Sandra Kerr. My duo partner, George Sansom, in his band Granny's Attic, with a kind of work colleague of yours, Cohen Braithwaite Kilcoyne, who's also been on the podcast as well. It all comes back around. Their band Granny's Attic made it the title song of their most recent album that came out last year, the album called Cold Blows the Wind. What Cohen wrote as the sleeve notes: singers in the English folk tradition always seem to pair this ballad with the most beautiful melodies, and the tune to this version is no exception. It was taken down by the American folk song collector James Madison Carpenter from Charles Rose of South Littleton in Worcestershire, about 20 miles to the east of our former stomping ground of Worcester. So we got a nice Worcestershire melody there, and yep, they're fab, and that's Granny's Attic on the album Cold Blows the Wind from 2025. I'll end with the most, possibly, by the virtue of the nature of what band it is, the most widespread revival performance maybe, is the band Bellowhead, because they did, John Bowden sang a version of it with Bellowhead, the 11-piece folk big band. Their version is called Cold Blows the Wind, and I think John got most of it from May Bradley, but I don't think the melody is the May Bradley one, but I think he got the words from there. And on their 2010 album Hedonism, which is the one they recorded at Abbey Road Studios in London, which is very, very jammy of them, you can hear a full big band version of Cold Blows the Wind, almost in a kind of, in a slower 6/8 sort of time. I think it's more like a jazzy 3/4, but it works as kind of a 6/8 sort of thing. And that's on, it's a record-breaking album in terms of the number of copies it sold for an album of traditional folk songs and recorded at Abbey Road. And consequently, it means that this song has been performed on Later with Jules Holland, because Bellowhead did perform it on Jules Holland once. So there we go. And I'm rather partial to that version myself. But I will waffle no further on revival singers, but that's a list, and I will put links to all those in the show notes later on. But Nick Dow, thank you for coming on and being part of this mad project I seem to have embarked on.
Okay, well, that's lovely. I hope I've given you what the information you wanted.
Yes, absolutely, and a whole load of very interesting tangents as well. It's all good. It's all very much appreciated. And we may see you again sometime on the podcast in the future. But for the time being, Nick Dow, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Cold blows the wind tonight, sweetheart, sprinkling falls the rain. I never had but one sweetheart, in greenwood she lies slain. Aye, in greenwood she lies slain. I never had but one sweetheart, in greenwood she lies slain. I'll do as much for my sweetheart as any young man may. I'll sit and mourn all on her grave for 12 months and a day. Aye, for 12 months and a day. I'll sit and mourn all on her grave for 12 months and a day. When 12 months and a day were past, the dead began to speak. Who's that at my graveside, who will not let me sleep? I who will not let me sleep. Who's that at my graveside, and will not let me sleep? 'Tis I, your own true love, it's me. One kiss from your sweet lips is all I wish from thee. Aye, is all I wish from thee. One kiss from your sweet lips, it's all I wish from thee. My lips are cold as clay, my love, my breath smells earthy strong. If you were to have one kiss from me, your time would not be long. Aye, your time would not be long. If you were to have one kiss from me, your time would not be long. Don't you remember your father's garden, where you and I did walk? The finest flower that ever bloomed there, it's withered to the stalk. Aye, it's withered to the stalk. The finest flower that ever bloomed there is withered to the stalk. It's perished to the stalk, my love, withered away and brown. Both you and I and the whole wide world must go into the ground. I must go into the ground. Both you and I and the whole wide world must go into the ground. Cold blows the winter night, sweetheart, sprinkling falls the rain. I never had but one sweetheart, in greenwood she lies slain. I in greenwood she lies slain. I never had but one sweetheart, in greenwood she lies slain.
That was Nick Dow singing The Unquiet Grave. That brings us to the end of this episode. What did you think? What are your thoughts on this song? I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to drop me an email at intheroud@singyonder.co.uk or visit the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Threads and Blue Sky. Just search those social medias for In the Roud, a folk song podcast. If you are enjoying the podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you would give us a little rating and review on wherever you get your podcast from. That really helps the podcast to reach a wider audience. In the Roud is a media partner of Veteran, the traditional music label. Although this week's song does not currently feature on any of their releases, you can find details of their extensive catalogue on their website, veteran.co.uk. One last huge thanks to this week's guests, Brian Peters and Nick Dow. Join me next week for episode 2 of this season. We'll be looking at Roud 52, which is Child Ballad number 81. That's the ballad of Little Musgrave and Lady Barnard. My history guest will be David Atkinson, and my singer guest will be Frankie Armstrong. Until then, that's it from me. Stay safe, be well, and I'll see you next time in the Roud.